So here, my sincere thanks to Phil Collier, Jan from my team, and Roger Fraser from Australia, who helped me compile this presentation based on their wealth of experience on this topic in the development of certain software that they use for geodetic adjustments in Australia and New Zealand. So what's the motivation for doing a big network adjustment? Well, as we talked about yesterday, all the reference frames that are used by the GNSS providers, like GPS, Galileo, GLONASS, Beidou, they're all aligned with the International Terrestrial Reference Frame. So this means that you're trying to develop a national geodetic datum that should be aligned with those, because it means that you're doing things more efficiently. So it makes use of, allows you to make use of position and navigation from GNSS systems much more easily for people in your country, because all the data sets will be aligned with ITRF if your datum's aligned with ITRF. So how do we do it? Again, this is a refresher from yesterday. It's all around having these common reference points. So if you look at the ones that are marked in red, might be the GNSS cause stations in your country, our continuously operating reference stations, and the blue ones might be those ones who are included in the regional reference frame, or they could be IGS sites. So what is a geodetic adjustment? Well, it's a mathematical process, and it's used to ensure that that network of measurements that you collect is as accurate as possible. And it involves correcting and optimizing observations. It could be angles, distances, coordinates, and you're aiming to minimize errors and provide the best fit for a geodetic model or a reference framework. So there's different types of geodetic adjustments. You can have a local adjustment. These are small-scale networks, like a local land survey. Or you can have regional or national adjustments where you're working across a larger area, such as a country, to try and align with a specific geodetic datum. And then there's global adjustments, like those that are done to produce ITRF for data sets from satellite observations, and you're trying to ensure consistency across a global reference frame. So what are the key elements of performing this geodetic adjustment? Well, the first one is your observations and measurements. So this can include GNSS data, satellite measurements, levelling data, as well as traditional surveying observations like angles and distances. Many people, particularly the ones in the developing countries that I work with, some of them only have the angles and distances, and so they are a critical part of their geodetic adjustment when they want to bring those in. There's then a mathematical model. So a geodetic adjustment relies on having a mathematical model, like a least squares adjustment, to minimise the discrepancies between the observations and the theoretical values. And for those of you who are new to this will make a bit more sense when we go through an example, but it's good to have this written down for you to go back and have a look at. So we take the observations and measurements and we have a mathematical model, and then the aim with that model is to try and minimise the errors in those observations. So we've got to account for things like measurement errors that might have occurred when you were making the observations with the instrument or environmental factors, and then distribute those errors around the network in a statistically optimal way. We then have reference frames as another key element, and the aim here is to try and align our adjusted network with specific reference frames, and that could be NAD 83 if you're in America, or ETRS if you're in Europe, to ensure consistency across your data sets. So what is least squares? Well, it's an optimal estimation technique where you have redundant observations, and it's a nonlinear observation equations, and it gives a unique solution from infinite possibilities. It minimises the weighted sum of the squared residuals, and hence the name least squares. So in essence, it's the best or the most statistically likely solution for the observations you have to try and fit that model. So here's a little example where we have more than three observations and two unknowns, and it's a linear regression example. And in this case here, you can see all those red dots, and from those red dots, you're trying to define what that line would be. So you have two unknown parameters, which are A and B. You have your observations, which are at the front in green. That's the number of y's, y1, 2, 3, and then you have something called a design matrix. That's the model that I was talking about. And that design matrix is designed to organise the values of the variables, which are the independent variables, for multiple observations in a structured way. And the aim of this is to try and minimise those errors, minimise those red ones at the end. If you can compute the parameters for A and B while minimising those errors, that'll give you the solution that you're looking for this linear regression. So why do we use them for geodetic adjustments? Well, geodetic adjustments are complex, a massive estimation problem. You have a combination of different diverse techniques. You have data quality varies, that can vary with survey date, it can vary with the instrument that you used, it can vary with the metadata that you might have or the type B errors that might be associated with the site where you are operating. And the goal is to try and improve and quantify the coordinate accuracy that comes out of that. So the least squares approach provides a statistically optimal way to combine that data. It allows you to individually weight observations. It gives you a sophisticated way to debug and validate your results, and hopefully has a minimal impact on the original observations and gives you, as output, reliable estimates of the final coordinates. So not all observations are equal, and we weight them, particularly when you have different data types, because not all observations are of the same type, not all observations are of the same precision. Most observations, the most precise observations, you want to have them make the most influence when you're doing this technique. And you want to assign an appropriate standard deviation a priori, so this is before the adjustment starts, to each observation in a way to achieve this. And this is where geodesy and geodetic adjustments, it's a bit like an art form as well as being a science. You need to understand your data and you need to weight that data and make intelligent decisions and professional decisions about that data. You don't just throw everything into a model and expect the right answer to come out. You need to understand what you're putting in. And the standard deviations are applied through this weighting matrix in the least squares adjustment. So we also use constraining stations. So this is where we're talking about linking the adjustment to the national geodetic datum. You can link it to a regional frame or you can link it to an international frame. And you're trying to limit the propagation of measurement errors. We're trying to improve the precision of the adjusted coordinates. And this will be sourced from the national geodetic adjustment, and you'll use that as constraint of the variances in the national adjustment. So here's an example of a simple levelling network where the start and end points are the same. So we have a closed circle, and therefore the sum of the heights should come to 0 as you go around your levelling network. But if we have a look at the measurements there and the inconsistencies, you see that we have this error that comes out the end of 0.3. So a way to distribute that error, if you considered that each of those levelling lines was equal, was that you would just equally distribute that error amongst the levelling network. So you have 0.05 added to each levelling line, and then the sum of the errors would then come to 0 by distributing that error throughout the network. Here's an example that's in 3D, and this is where you get into what is more like real life. And so this is just a mock-up that I put together, and you could see this as a geodetic network adjustment where the blue circles represent ITRF sites, and they have a certain accuracy, or you could uncertainty in ISO terms, and that's the smallest there. If you then go to a regional reference frame site, has a slightly bigger uncertainty, and then you might have campaign data that you're introducing into your national adjustment, and that has the biggest uncertainty because it might have only been a 6-hour observation on a survey mark. And you can see there that by having this interconnected web of measurements that are coming throughout the network, the ITRF sites are going to provide the most constraint, and you're not going to allow that final coordinate to move outside of the blue area, whereas the campaign one may actually shift. So as you run your adjustment, you might find the final output looks something like this. So based on the weighting that you applied, you're allowing that campaign observation to drift the most. You allow the regional reference frames ones to drift a little bit based on the weighting you apply, but the ITRF ones, they still have some uncertainty associated with it, but they are not allowed to move as much as the others. So in terms of the recommended procedure, I won't go through this in a lot of detail, particularly because I don't want to stop you from the coffee break, but I want to give you a brief overview of the procedure on how you would go through this. And you think about the primary purpose being a way to estimate the final coordinates from a set of measurements and provide uncertainties on those as well. I'll skip over that one for a moment. So in terms of the procedure, the survey control measurements, first of all, you've got to correct them from all known calibrations. So this might be applying corrections you would like if you had theodolite or total station instruments. And then you're essentially coming up with the uncertainty that you have for that measurement, and that effectively becomes the weight that is applied in the adjustment. And then to test the survey control for errors or redundant measurements or larger degrees of freedom, the first step that you would go through is a minimally constrained adjustment. And this is what's known as like a local test or a global test that you can do on that adjustment to try and identify whether or not the measurements that you have and the uncertainties that you've provided are actually meaningful, or is it showing you that there is some issue with the data that you're trying to feed into it. So if required, this estimated survey uncertainty and the relative uncertainty values need to be examined to assess whether or not the survey has any predefined uncertainty or quality thresholds associated with it. And then when you're attempting to propagate datum and uncertainty, you then do a fully constrained and appropriately weighted adjustment once you finally have all the internal measurements that you know are correctly set up in the right way. So the fully constrained adjustment should be done using a local test to start with to verify that the constraints that you've applied to the data set do not result in measurement failures. So that means where you can't get all the measurements to connect with each other. And the fully constrained adjustment should only be tested using the global test. And if that adjustment fails, the quality of the survey measurements and the constraint you've used needs to be examined to try and find the cause of the problem. So if required, you might find that the estimated positional uncertainties, so those coloured circles that I showed you to start with, or the relative uncertainties of the measurements need to be examined. And this is where you really need to understand your data. So once you've done all this, you can then evaluate the survey uncertainty. You can do statistical tests using in the network adjustment to demonstrate the reliability of the survey control network. And the following two tests should be done, undertaken both minimally constrained and then fully constrained to evaluate the quality of the survey and the derived results. So I won't go through the details of the local test, and the global test, but I'll skip to this example. And you can see here, this is an example where we've got a small, high-precision general-purpose survey that's been done using some GNSS and some terrestrial data. And the purpose of this survey is to establish 4 new marks from the 2, let's call them geospatial reference system marks or control marks from a country. And one of those control marks is GNSS, and it's a cause site. And that's the that's the red triangle. That's my colour blindness coming through. Red triangle shown in the bottom. And the list of the survey control marks and coordinates is shown on the next page. I'll get to that in a minute. So here's the example of your station information on the left-hand side and the terrestrial measurement information that you've taken to measure the level differences, slope distances, and vertical angles and horizontal angles between all these marks. So all the different GNSS baseline measurements and the uncertainties were based on only 2 hours of observation in this example. And what comes out the other end? To cater for the influence of gravity, you actually need to introduce these n values, or the geoid-ellipsoid separation values. So as part of this survey control network, you need to make sure that if you've only got level data, it might be an orthometric height. So you need to apply a geoid to ellipsoid separation to translate that orthometric height into an ellipsoid height to run it through the adjustment. And of course, what comes with that is additional uncertainty values as well on those n values, which then propagate through to uncertainty on the ellipsoidal height for the levelling data. So in order to verify, we first do this global test that I was talking about. And that verifies that the GNSS measurement precisions through this minimally constrained adjustment, incorporating only the GNSS measurements are executed. So we hold survey control mark 22 fixed in this adjustment, and the number of measurements is 18, that's 3 per baseline. Number of unknowns is 9, so we have a redundant number of observations to carry out the adjustment. So this is known as degrees of freedom of 9, and the minimally constrained adjustment at the 95% confidence interval yields the results that are shown there in table 5, where for those of you who understand sigma 0 values, you're trying to get something close to 1, and that's pretty close to 1, and you can see it fits between the upper limit and the lower limit of what we're looking for. That shows that together this network of observations actually fits together. So we then run using the local test, each baseline is examined to assess whether the correction exceeds that 95% critical value, and a procedure for the test to examine whether or not normalised residuals exceeds the critical value at 95%, which in this case is that 1.96. So from the test, it's discovered the X and Y components of the baseline fail. So something has gone wrong with this adjustment. So once you make the adjustments that are required, the GNSS measurements pass the local test, and the remaining terrestrial measurements are introduced to verify this set of measurements as a whole. So you are applying this minimally constrained adjustment, holding, again, survey mark 22 fixed, and in this case, the number of measurements is 43, and the number of unknowns is 15. So we have a number of degrees of freedom is 28 once you introduce the terrestrial marks. And again, you can see the sigma 0 here is 0.778, and it's in between the upper limit and the lower limit. And sorry, wrong button. So having confirmed that all the measurements pass the local test, you can then apply the constraint upon the adjustment to propagate that local test information through to a global adjustment. And the adopted GRS constraints, or they're your national datum constraints, are then propagated through the rest of the network. So you're testing, does things fit internally, and then you're constraining that to your national datum marks, and that allows you to then finally alter or get the alignment of your local network in line with the national datum adjustment as well. And so that's removing any other or applying any final corrections and providing the alignment with your national datum. All right, so I might stop there. I appreciate that's moving through that quite quickly. I do have a worked example of this that I can make available as well that shows all the data, because I know it's particularly difficult to work through these kind of examples without having a worked example in front of you where you can see how the data changes according to the test that you provide. So we have worked examples of this that I can share with people who need some help with this, and we're also happy to take your data and work with you to try and work through the different tests and understand how all this datum propagation and uncertainty works in local tests and global tests. So if you need some assistance with this, please come and talk to us. We'll do a short session on this afterwards as well for those countries who need some help. We're going to try and pair up countries who have experience with this with those who don't have experience with this, so that we can talk through each of these elements in a bit more detail. But let's stop there for now, and we'll go